Welcome to the Flourish Frequency, the show where we activate and amplify the frequencies of success, joy, and abundance. I'm your host, Beth Larsen, a high-performance and quantum success coach. If you're ready to ditch the hard hustle and embrace a more effortless flow, then this is the show for you. Together, we'll tap into quantum thinking, harness the laws of the universe, and unlock the secrets to living a life of more. More joy, more energy, more passion, more money, and more meaning. No more simply surviving, we're going beyond thriving. It's time to flourish. The Flourish Frequency Show starts now. Hello, and welcome back to the Flourish Frequency Show. And we were talking there about for the women who want more, and specifically today, we're going to be talking about more energy in particular. Today's episode is for the woman who might be feeling foggy, fatigued, or just off and maybe not feeling that flourish vibe. I am joined today by somebody who's walked that path herself, in addition to me also walking that path. I think it's one of the reasons why we resonate so well together. And she now guides others through it with powerful grace. Please welcome Lori Bender, who's a certified health and life coach, an integrative health practitioner, and founder of Wellness Bender. Lori's journey from her own burnout in New York City to radiant whole body vitality took her around the world, literally, through yoga teacher training in Bali, studies in Ayurveda, and advanced certifications in nutrition and transformational psychology. She discovered that wellness isn't just about what you eat, it's about how you live. So in today's conversation, we're going to hear more about her journey and dive into how food is frequency and what you consume affects how you feel, think, and manifest. The emotional and energetic impact of detoxing beyond just physical health, and what it really looks like to live in alignment with your energy and to become the woman that you know you're meant to be. So whether you're ready for a physical reset or you want to deepen your connection to your body and intuition, this episode is full of practical insights and metaphysical wisdom to help you nourish your highest self. So let's dive in. Welcome, Lori.
Oh, thank you.
So happy to have you here.
So happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, definitely. Well, for the audience, you know, Lori and I, Lori came to me a couple of years ago and we worked together coaching. And then I've turned around and worked with her a couple of times. I think I've done, 3 rounds of detox with you now.
Yes.
So easiest detox in the world, which has been, which is the reason I keep coming back on a regular basis to do that with you. So I've been really wanting to explore this part of the conversation for a while. You know, as I said, this show is all about the Flourish Frequency. And I think this is such an important conversation and approach to maintaining a flourishing frequency. So you are the perfect person really to have on for this conversation. So thank you for joining me. So I guess to give the audience a little context, you know, I mentioned that you also had experienced your own burnout. And, you know, that really took you around the world. So tell us a little bit more, if you'll go into that part of your story a little bit for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So this was well over 10 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
I was living and working in New York City and high-end real estate, so the stakes are high and there's a lot of expectation from the clients. And I had just stopped prioritizing, myself, my health, and was working late hours and not setting those boundaries. And I hit my burnout, and I'll never forget. I was standing at this corner in Manhattan. I was in Midtown trying to get a cab to go downtown to a meeting, and I was late, and I was trying to fly a cab in the afternoon. And if anyone knows New York City, you know that is the worst time to try to get a cab because they all switch their shifts at that time. So it's like impossible. So I'm standing there trying to get a cab, and I'm just getting later and later to this meeting. And I had a knot in my stomach already because of just what I was about to go into. I knew it was going to be kind of a difficult, meeting. And I had this terrible thought. I was like, well, maybe one of these cabs will just like hit into me a little bit. Like nothing too serious, but just enough to like get me out of this situation. And I was like, wow, that's
a wake-up call.
It was a wake-up call, right? That was like, oh, okay. Things have really taken a turn here. And luckily a cab did not have to hit me. Okay, so that did not happen.
Yeah.
But around that time, my boss pulled me aside And this was somebody that I had been working with since day one of the company. And he could see that something was off. And he said, Lori, you need to take back control of your life.
Wow.
And this was just so grounding to me because I didn't realize that how I was feeling kind of in the inside and was really showing that much, especially to my boss, who's also really busy and, didn't know that maybe he would have taken the time to even notice, where I was, with my life. And I was like, wow, okay, he's noticing it. For him to actually say something, I'm like, all right, things have got to change. And so that was really the beginning of when I started to kind of shift everything. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. I relate to so much of your story because that's similar to my story. I didn't have that thought go through my head
You know,
for
right?
sure, but I remember being in that place in New York City too, um, and just being so into my career that I wasn't paying attention to my body and what was going on with all the stress. And even if I did, I was kind of thinking, well, nobody else notices it.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
can just keep powering through. And it's
Hmm.
not till you get a wake up call of some sort that you're like, whoa, okay, I really need to do something and do
Yes.
something different. So I know my different looked how that looked. How did that look for you? Like what you
Yeah.
mentioned that in your bio that, it kind of sent you around the world. So
Hmm.
what made you go to that extreme? And what really led you? Was it one step to the next, or, how did that
Yeah.
happen?
So that took a little time because at first, when I kind of realized I was in the burnout and I said, okay, something has to change.
Mhm.
And so I started to take small steps to just prioritize myself more, slow down. Like I did have a yoga practice, thank goodness. And so, leaning more into that, and starting my mornings off a little better. And, you know, gradually it turned into wanting to learn more about this and traveling. But for a while though, there was little signs that things were off, right? You start to feel, maybe the fatigue and the tiredness. And, I was having a lot of like gut issues. Then my hormones started getting all, out of whack as well. So, um there's whispers that start and with your body, and then it starts getting, then they start speaking louder. And, that's what started to happen. But what's looking back on it now, I thought it was so normal, right? I thought, oh, it's just normal to feel this way. It's normal to feel tired. It's normal to have, really bad, period pain. I had terrible periods. And so just things like that I was like, oh, this is just what happens. Or, as we start to get older, we might start to tell ourselves that too, right? Like, this is just what happens. But now I know that that's not really normal, and it doesn't really need to be that way. And so when I started seeking out other answers, for health, I led me into Ayurveda, which was one of the practices that I really studied, and learning that there was so much wisdom in more of the Western cultures. So I
Mhm.
really wanted to go and experience it for myself. And I was doing training while I was traveling, actually, with a naturopath doctor who had an Ayurvedic, um, part of his, practice. He had studied that as well. So it was kind of perfectly fitting where I was traveling the world and studying it, getting to experience it at the same time.
Yeah. And so you were traveling the world for fun also at the same
Mhm.
time.
Yeah.
And this was something that was able to fit into that practice or into that lifestyle, I should say.
Yes. Yeah. It was a nice break. So it had been 14 years of nonstop kind of New York
Got
life.
it.
And so it was a much needed break, but then also got to, study something that I was really enjoying. Yeah.
Wow. And then you also did yoga teacher training in
Yes. Yeah.
Bali? Yeah.
Yes. So that was a great experience. That was a 28-day, 200-hour yoga teacher training in the hills of Ubud and in Bali, and it was just gorgeous. I mean, we were surrounded by rice paddies, and you
Yeah.
talk about just getting away and getting removed from all the hustle and bustle, and really just getting to slow down and, really deepen my practice, my yoga practice, physically and, mentally as well. So that was, yeah,
Wow.
great experience.
We really do have a lot in common. Now, I know when I went through my burnout period and I did something similar, I took some time off and was traveling, but a big part of it for me was also the mindset of, I'm going to go figure out what I was doing wrong, fix it so I
Mhm.
can go right back into the hustle and bustle lifestyle and do it better. Like that was my mentality at the time.
Uh-huh.
Thank God that changed. But um, I'm curious if you had something similar in your mind, or were you completely like, no, I need to have an entire overhaul? Like,
Mhm.
I'm just curious what that looked like for you.
Yeah, yeah. So I think at first I thought it needed to be a complete overhaul, and I wanted to just, remove myself from the stresses of the city life. And at that time we were thinking about my husband and I, boyfriend at the time, but husband now, thinking about moving to California and just changing the lifestyle. But then we actually ended up coming back to New York, and which we didn't expect, and living there again. And so I really got to kind of actually incorporate what the things that I had been learning about and saying, okay, is there really a balance that you can find? Is it possible to actually live and work in New York City and not have that burnout, right?
Right.
And so so yes, I was able to actually walk the walk, which is great because I have, clients now that are in it. And so, it's one thing to say, okay, we'll just quit your job and, move to Bali and do yoga,
Yeah.
right? But but not everybody can do that or want,
Right.
right?
And not everybody wants to
And
either.
wants to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how
Yeah.
do you actually, find balance and still, maintain your life that you want? So
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the reasons that you're so great at what you do now is because you actually have gone through it yourself. It's one thing I think to pursue your career because you're interested in it. It's another thing to go through it because you're completely passionate because you've been there. You've done it. You've gone through the hard times of it and you've also experienced the other side. And then it's just something lit within you that's like, oh, I need to actually help other people with this as well.
yes, that's
So,
exactly what happened.
yeah.
Yeah, once I kind of learned that for myself, I was like, I have to share this
Yeah.
and and tell other people about this and guide others through it.
Wow. So I'm curious that how long was it before you started to notice shifts in your own energy, shifts in your body,
Mhm.
and how did you prioritize that then? Like,
Mhm.
what did that look like for you?
Yeah. Yeah. So as I said, I kind of thought things were normal at first, kind of just sweeping things under the rug, thinking like, okay, this is just life. So then when things kind of started to build up and I started to really just slow down and listen, um, and really start to kind of figure out, okay, what does my body need? And that kind of ties into the Ayurveda practice that I started to bring in because with Ayurveda, you kind of learn about your own mind body constitution, right? So there's these three different energy types that are based on the five elements that are around us, but are also in us as well. So
Mm,
there's earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And once I found out my body type, it was kind of like finding the owner's manual of my body and be like, oh, okay, like this makes sense. Like now I understand the lifestyle changes that I need to make and the food changes I need to make for me. So my body type is more of the Vata body type, which tends to be rattled easily with their nervous system. Okay,
mhm.
so living and working in New York City obviously was rattling my nervous system, and I didn't know at that time the things that I should be doing to help ground myself and bring myself down, right?
Mm,
So, I was maybe still having more like raw foods and cooler foods and thinking that I was doing things that were healthy, right? Because those are, sound like, healthy things.
yeah.
Actually, were just kind of fueling the fire, right? And then if I added caffeine to that or something else like that, it was just going to, amplify it even more. So really starting to listen to like, okay, what does my body need at this moment? And do I feel that, I need to be brought down a little bit, grounded a little bit more? What am I going to go to for those things? And it's really about pausing and listening. Like the morning and evening kind of check-in was so important to start doing for me, and kind of reflecting back on the day of like, okay, how'd things go? What could I have, done a little better? Um, or big part of that.
Yeah. That's fascinating, actually. And I love the fact that what you're doing is not a one size fits all thing. It's really customized and taking a look. I didn't realize that it really looked at your energy type
Mhm.
and the
Yeah.
way your energy works. So, of course, this makes total sense why this was an approach that also always interests me. So,
Mhm.
that's really fascinating. So you said you're so I know it's
So
Kapha, Vata, and Pitta. Is that
yes, yeah,
right?
you're right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Yeah, those are the three energy types. And
Okay.
you can take a quiz. It is something that I go through with my clients as well, but you can just Google a quiz to find out your dosha. And
Okay.
there's a physical part of it, but also mental. And sometimes it's not the same. So you might be more of a Vata, mindset. So Vatas tend to be very creative and a little bit like up in the air, like a little bit up in the clouds, right?
Yeah.
That kind of think
Yeah.
of like a Vata because they're up there in the air and the ether. And then, a kapha is more grounded. And so they might be a little bit more of a calm energy, very, might be a little bit nurturing energy, but they tend to kind of also be maybe more of a people pleaser.
Mhm.
So, it's not just your physical characteristics that we're looking at with this, it's also your mental as well.
Oh, that's fascinating. Is it similar to body, mind, spirit when you talk the three, or because you said more up in the air and more grounded? I was just
Right.
curious, does it relate that way, or no,
Not no, so
am
as
I
long as
stretching that?
you're yeah, I mean, the goal with it really is to kind of reach your highest potential and, self actualization, kind of getting to that
Yeah.
levels. When your everything is, in more imbalance for any of the bots, any of the types, you're
Yeah.
going to be better, more in that state. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. Fascinating. Okay, I want to dive more into this, but we need to take a quick break here. So when we come back, we're going to talk more about nourishing your energy field and taking a look more at the metaphysical side of this as well as the physical side of it. So we'll be back. Thanks, Lori. All right, we are back with Lori Bender from Wellness Bender. I love the name, by the way, of your company. And right before the break, we were talking a little bit about the three, you call them doshas, right?
Yep.
The three doshas or the three constitutions. Is that
Mind, body,
correct? Okay.
constitution. Yes. Mhm.
Yep. And this is in Ayurveda. So what I really would love to dive even more further into here is this concept of food as frequency and how it nourishes our frequency, because that's what this whole show is about. It's about the flourish frequency. And for the listeners also, and for Lori, I think this part too, but when I was going through my burnout, I know I used to always just say to myself, I feel like I'm just dying on the vine and I just want to flourish. Like
Mhm.
that's where the name for my show came from, the name for many of my programs came from, because I just wanted that energy, that feeling of flourishing. And for me, that went beyond the feeling of thriving. Like
Mhm.
I always think of, and I've said this many times on the show, I always think of thriving as like the plant that's coming up through the concrete. it's it's thriving, but it's doing it the hard way. And flourishing to me feels like that space that's got all of the beautiful benefits of thriving, only it's doing it in a much more luxurious way, in a more supported way. And that's what this show is all about. So when we talk about food as frequency and we're looking at these different doshas or different constitutions, how does that fit in to what you do? And how does that relate to being able to live a flourishing frequency or live in the frequency of flourishing?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's so connected. And so, once you kind of start to look at food as an energy source that can not just, the proteins or the carbohydrates or, the fats that are in it, right? But even just looking at it deeper of like, okay, this food is energy, right? That's exactly why we're eating food is to nourish our body and energize it. but then also realizing, okay, well, what do I need and what is this food going to provide to me, right?
Mhm.
So when we think about the, kapha body type, and anybody could be any of these at any one time, by the way, everyone can be more of one, but you might fall out of balance and kind of lean more into one or the other. So we all might have some
Okay.
kapha days, right? So
Okay.
we're kind of feeling like a little bit slower, and we might need something that's going to bring us up and energize us more,
Mhm.
bring us up to that higher, that into the air. So we're going to be looking for, foods that would do that for us, that are lighter, and maybe are, have more water to them, and,
Mhm.
can bring more of that energy, versus if you are in, like, you're already a little flighty and you're a little like up here in the air and you want to come down. It's like, okay, so,
Right.
how would, I think we all do this just naturally too. If you think about the seasons, which this is all tied into as well, when it's a cold winter day, like, what do you want, right? Like, you want something that is warm and nourishing,
Yeah.
right? Versus if it's a hot summer day, like, what are you going to go for? You want that watermelon, or,
Yeah.
something, cold, right?
Like the
So
warm soup in January and the gazpacho in the summer.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So realizing that it does happen with the seasons, but that can just happen for us depending on what's going on in our life, right? And where we are any given day, and kind of being able to see food as being able to nourish you in that way, and really bringing you into a balance. What you're talking about, it's like where you can, like, really flourish, right?
Yeah.
And there is a hard way to do this, because if you don't know your body type or what your body really needs, you might be doing some things that, yeah, you could be getting some results, but, you're doing it the hard way, right? It's
Yeah.
like, oh, but once you realize, oh, I could actually make some tweaks to my exercise routine. Like, maybe I don't need to be working out so hard and pushing so hard. Maybe some more, I need the more relaxed yoga class, and that could actually be better for me, and I could lose weight and be more in balance by not pushing myself to those extremes. So so it's exactly, what you talk about so much, of just, not have to work harder, and finding that flow and that ease to really flourish.
Yeah. So, okay. So I love what you were saying about the seasons. And so are you saying that that also relates to, like, if I'm in a certain season of my life, does it
Mhm.
work that way too? Is that what you're saying?
Certainly, yeah,
Make
it
sure I'm
certainly can
understanding
be.
that.
Yeah, certainly, yeah. So absolutely, we all, depending on where we are in life, could be in a different, stage.
Mhm.
So we might, be more into. I haven't talked much about the pitta, but the pitta one is more the fire. Okay, so they're the ones that really, kind of get things done, right? That type A personality. And so you even if you're not necessarily full pitta, maybe you've been in that pitta state, right? You've been kind of launching a project, or you've been, really implementing and doing, right? Like, that's going
Yeah.
to be more like the pitta, stage of life that you're in. And they have the fire in them, which is great, right?
Yeah.
But, they tend to want more of that fire, whether that's like spicy foods, or, the really, intense classes or competitive sports, right? So
Mm.
for them, it's like, okay, that's, need to slow down and cool down, right? So it's like, how do you cool down fire? What are you, thinking about with that? It's like, oh, okay, let's bring this down with, maybe a cold plunge for them would work fine. Whereas for other dishes, that's not going to, work well, but actually cooling themselves down, bringing in
Right.
some cooler foods, to find that balance.
That's interesting. That is so fascinating.
Yeah.
I love that. And from working with me that I look at the levels of consciousness too. And we talk a lot about that by me consciousness that sounds very similar to a pitta, where it's like I can make things happen. I can do.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how does that relate to this? Like,
Mhm.
there's the by me consciousness, but then there's also the through me consciousness and the as me consciousness, where things do start to get easier and more flow. and you're still taking a lot of action, but you're doing it from more of a place of inspiration. Does that relate to this
Yeah.
conversation?
Yeah, yeah, I think so because you know, any of us, I think especially, your audiences probably can really relate to that type A kind of, wanting to,
Yeah.
accomplish things and, check things off the list and, hit one milestone after the other. Um, and you can take that too far and you can get yourself kind of burnt out and exhausted from that, right? Versus
Yeah.
realizing those moments of cultivating that energy, but then also balancing it off and taking it down, right? And like taking the
Yeah.
break and finding the nice, seasons, right? Finding that
Yeah.
seasons of life, and also with, life and, projects and work and whatnot. So yeah, I think it definitely
Okay.
correlates there.
So another thing I'm curious about is, are there certain foods that tend to lower a woman's vibration differently than men's?
Mm-hmm.
And how does that relate to the doshas?
Yeah, that's
Does
interesting.
it?
So, for women, really, one of the main things that comes up is actually women just not eating, right? It,
Mm,
tends to be, especially for women, really throws off our stress hormones and our metabolism. So that's one of the first things that I always kind of work with women, especially, is just making sure, are you eating enough and are you eating early enough in the day?
mm,
Because so often, we think, oh, it's better to be taking these longer, fasts and not eating, and you might have the coffee and then that's it, and you're going on with your day. And what does that do? That just kind of leads you to then you maybe get busy in your day, and what if lunch didn't really happen, and it just sets you up for ultimately making a decision that maybe you didn't really plan to make, right? Because then all of a sudden
right.
something's there that you maybe wouldn't have eaten, and
Yeah.
you're at the point where you're starving, and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna make this decision, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, for women, I would say it's more about just actually not getting caught up in what works for men, because men can actually deal with a little bit of the longer fasting.
Hmm.
Bodies can handle it more. But as women, it doesn't work that way for us. So not trying to do what men do and actually say, okay, we need an energy source first thing in the morning, especially before we're going to work out or head into our busy day.
Hmm.
And then you can take it a step further, of course, if then, okay, what do I need at that moment, or what's better for me or my body? But just actually having some kind of high quality food in the morning is
Mm.
going to work wonders
Yeah.
for many of us. And then besides that, it's really, then it gets more like person by person, whether you're male or female, kind of, what's better for your body.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, and each dosha might have different things that would raise somebody's frequency versus lower it. Is that correct? Like, so as a kapha, what would lower my frequency? Because that's, I think, my
Yeah.
primary one from
Yeah. So,
the tests I've taken.
oh, you have, okay, yeah. Yeah. So when we're talking about the physical aspects of the kapha,
Uh-huh.
um, they do tend to, gain weight a little easier. So, they're sometimes the people that feel like they can just walk by, the donut shop and they're going to gain weight, right? Um, yeah. So anything that's maybe a little bit more, a heavier food is going to just kind of bring that heaviness back into more so in the body, right?
Okay.
So um, a kapha can handle more drier food, raw foods, a smoothie or juices. Just think of like lighter things, right? Is going to raise the vibration of the kapha and kind of get them out of that maybe a little bit of a sluggishness that they can, fall into.
Okay.
Um, yeah, if that makes
And
sense.
what would, so since not everybody's a kapha listening, I'm
Yeah.
curious, and let's open it up for the rest of the listeners.
Mhm.
What might a pitta,
Mhm.
um, what might be high frequency for a pitta to raise
Yeah.
frequency
Yeah.
or to
So
lower it if that's what's needed?
yeah. Yeah. So, if if our life is in pretty good balance, right, we don't
Mhm.
have to necessarily always be thinking so much about what's on our plate regarding our dosha, but it's when we get out of balance. So when the pitta is out of balance,
Mhm.
a pitta has been kind of really in that fiery state. They tend to, like I said before, like go for those like spicier foods, right? They like those things.
Right.
It's just going to add to the like the fire.
Got it.
It just can also be a little bit maybe quick to anger sometimes. So in terms of the mental part of the pitta. So we're trying to, when we find ourselves out of balance in the pitta state, we want to cool ourselves off
Okay.
and really kind of tone down that fire that's been kind of overheated.
So by cooling off, though, you don't mean ice cream, or do you?
Um, it could be, it could be, yeah. And just the amount that you need to cool off and no more, right?
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah, or something else, cold.
Okay.
Dairy, in general, um, can be, that would be something that the kapha would try to kind of keep it a minimal amount. Pitta a little bit more
Okay.
off, but and then the vata could handle a bit more, according to our anyway.
Right. Okay. And I'm curious, that actually makes me think, well, actually, I'm going to come back to my question. And
Mhm.
before we do that and ask about the vata, then that's the third one, right? So, like,
Yeah,
what would
yeah.
be something that would, or what would be some suggestions in terms of food that might bring a vata back in balance?
Back in balance, yeah. So that's one that I'm, so familiar with because that's really where I tend to lean. So yeah, that's more when we're in out of balance with the vata, we maybe are having a hard time actually gaining weight and putting on weight. And then
Okay.
mentally, we might be having a hard time just for too much of racing thoughts and,
Hmm.
in our heads too much. So anything that's going to ground us back down. So you think of root vegetables, right? So
Mm.
vegetables are grown in the ground and they're very connected to the earth. So that's going to bring us back down.
Yep.
And so similarly, that would be something that like the kapha wouldn't be looking at root vegetables, right? So anything you can kind of see those are two different extreme sides of the balance
Yeah.
there.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then I know we're going to take another break in a couple of minutes here, but I would love, real quick, before we head to break, um, I'm curious your thoughts on like humanely raised animals and what that how that impacts frequency um,
Yeah.
versus inhumanely, because I think we have a lot of that practice here in the United States, at least. And I've always worried about that in terms of how it impacts. And, for someone who's not a vegetarian, though, because I'm not,
Hmm.
I do eat animal protein, what are your thoughts on that? How does that impact? And does that have anything to do with Ayurveda at all?
Yeah. So the Ayurveda does kind of tend more towards a vegetarian, vegan, diet, for sure. It's a sister science of yoga, and so
Mhm.
there is that. But this is a struggle because so when I first started changing my diet, I actually cut out all animal protein completely
Mhm.
and didn't go completely vegan, but very close to it. Was very vegetarian and the part of it was the health reasons, because some of those meats, especially if we're getting them that are more processed, like they're bringing down our frequency, right? Um, they're not the high vibration foods that we really want. They're
Right.
a little harder to digest, and there's more to detox in our body.
Right.
So I cut it out completely, and then we've really tried to find the best sources that we can for any animal protein that we do
Right.
bring into our diet. So it is hard here in the US and not having kind of your own farm and knowing exactly how the animals are raised. I was
Yeah.
raised in Arkansas on a farm, and so I actually got to experience that as a child.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and we had our own chickens and cows, and so I got to see the humane way of doing
Yeah.
it. Um, And then, we're so far from that, now when we walk into a grocery store for the most part.
Yeah.
But just trying to make if that is something that you want to add into, it's in your diet, just trying to make the absolute best choice that you can with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I personally believe what we're consuming, you know, it's frequency still.
Yeah.
And so if the animal went through some sort of trauma in the process,
Mhm.
that's going to be absorbed into the body. That's my own belief.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. And that's very in line with the Hindu belief. And that's why a lot of
yeah.
um, Hindus are vegetarian, because they don't want to bring on that energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That was an interesting little side note there on that conversation.
Mhm.
I hadn't intended originally in asking you that, but so we're going to take another quick break here. And when we come back, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your thoughts on detoxing, because I know I've done 3 rounds of detox with you, and that's
Mhm.
something that you do on a regular basis with people too. And so I'd love to hear more about that and
Sure.
how that fits into this whole conversation on frequency. So we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back with Lori. All right. Well, I am having so much fun having this conversation about food and frequency and, just nutrition and frequency as well. So, welcome back, Lori. I wanted to really open this part of the conversation up to talking a little bit about detox, because, as I mentioned before, I know that that's something that you take people through on a regular basis. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on why you feel detoxing is important, or what particularly about the detox is important,
Mhm.
and a little bit about the kind of detox that you do, or that you facilitate with people.
Sure.
So can you
Yeah,
share a little bit more about that?
absolutely. Yeah. So the detoxing is so important, especially today in our modern world, where we're just exposed to so much, and our diet does tend to include a lot more things that aren't just whole foods. And I'm not on that Arkansas farm anymore, just growing my own food and getting to have that all the time. So it's so important to just kind of be able to remove the things that are causing the inflammation and the tiredness and the fatigue and all the things that are kind of lowering that vibration that we talked about, that frequency, and bringing in foods that are just whole foods, clean, and doing that for a period of 7 days typically, although you can do it for 14 or even 21 days safely.
Right.
And really allowing your body to just do what it naturally does on its own, but we're just giving it a bit more support. So the detox that we do is a functional medicine detox. And all that really means is that we are supporting our liver with all of the supplements that we're taking and the lifestyle things that we're doing, during the detox. And our liver naturally filters our blood every 6 minutes and is pulling out as much as it
Oh,
can.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, every
Every
six
six
minutes,
minutes.
our whole blood is getting recirculated, and our liver is just working away.
Mhm.
And if you can imagine trying to, work where there's not many breaks, right? So
Right.
sometimes we don't always give ourselves some time where we're not eating, right? Maybe we're snacking in between meals, or we're grazing because we think that's the better way to eat, like a bunch of little small meals versus, more balanced meals.
Right.
And our digestion system and our body doesn't get a break, right? And then maybe we're eating right before bed, which right before bed, I mean, getting into that deeper detox happens every single night. But if we're eating, right up until bedtime or even an hour before, we're not allowing our bodies to get into that daily detox. So that's something that we kind of reset with our 7 days, and
Mhm.
kind of get into a nice flow of, set meals, clean meals, stopping eating before bedtime, and really, again, just allowing our body to do what it naturally wants to do anyway, and we just kind of get
Right.
out of the
Right.
way.
So the grazing versus eating like distinct meals, does that vary by the different dosha, or is that pretty much like we don't want to do grazing for any of them?
Right. Yeah,
How does
that's
that work?
universal. Yeah, that doesn't matter. Yeah, there's different. ones that might lean more towards that. The Vata actually tends to be more of the grazer and like doesn't actually eat proper meals. And
Okay.
they tend to kind of need to sit down and have a more structured meal. Um, and so yeah, you're giving your digestive system a break in between that, and you've done the detox. It's like
Yeah.
um, it's nice to actually sit down, like for me, because I guess I tend to go to the grazing,
Yeah.
phase times and like the snacking and the detox. I'm actually looking forward to my meal and sitting down and I'm actually a little hungry for it, right? Whereas maybe if I was always just kind of, oh, when I get a little hungry, I'll start eating or just kind of mindless eating, you don't really feel that, right? So
Yeah.
it's actually good to feel that a little bit of that hunger in between meals. Um,
So how often do you recommend doing a detox?
yeah, great question. So seasonally is great, and that's actually in alignment with the Ayurvedic kind of teachings of doing a seasonal reset. The detox that we do as well does have some of those principles built into it. So we're taking herbs and things that it kind of support our system based on this, the
Yeah.
ancient wisdom of Ayurveda. And so you can ideally do it seasonally. I do it at least typically about 3 times a year.
Yeah.
I will do it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mentioned, I think at the top that I think I've done 3 rounds of detox with you now. And the first two were actually honestly the easiest detoxes I've ever done. It was so simple. And I've done detoxing before and I was dreading kind of going into the first one. And it
Yeah.
ended up being the easiest thing. I think partially because you also had a group of us going through it together and you were supporting us. And it was kind of like we were cheering each other on. And
Uh,
but it was easy. Like it
mhm.
was really the first 2 days where we were without food,
Yep.
but taking supplemental
Yep.
shakes and
Mhm.
supplements. And then we immediately got into food like on day 3. So it was so simple. It was so easy to
Yeah.
stay on top of.
Yeah. I hear that a lot. Yeah. From people who've done other types of programs, that this is much easier. And I think it does have to do with making sure that your body has the proper nutrition that it needs, even
Yeah.
through our fasting days, which are the first 2 days of the detox, because we're still getting protein, we're still getting our nutrients. So your body is not lacking. It's not just water, a water fast, which can be kind of
Yeah.
too intense for most people right now, because there's so much to detox, unfortunately, in our that we're exposed to. So.
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
and then this last round, which I did in January, I had the worst headache for the first couple of days. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I'm curious, does that just mean obviously that I was carrying a lot more toxicity? Like I was definitely maybe not eating as well those
Uh,
previous couple of months. I mean, what
uh,
is that generally a symptom of
yeah.
like a really heavy toxic load?
Yeah, a headache is very common.
Yeah.
So the fact that you had your first two that you flew through really
Yeah.
well, um, is not always the case,
Yeah.
especially in the beginning, because there isn't a bit of an adjustment, whether that's taking out, sugar is another big adjustment for people, because we're not having any, sugar in our diet as well during the week. Caffeine can also be a factor as well, because,
I think that may have been it for me.
you cut out the caffeine, you blame it on the detox, but it actually was maybe more of a caffeine withdrawal going on. Yeah.
Yes, now that I think about it, because I generally, at this point in my life, I maybe have a cup of coffee a day,
Mhm.
because I do enjoy coffee. But I think back to like the years I was in retail, I like slammed coffee every day just to keep up. It was such false energy during that time. And I certainly wasn't looking at organic coffee at that time either. So, but I do think last fall, maybe I slipped a little bit and was doing a little bit more caffeine coffee than I was used to. So now that you're saying that, I'm thinking, oh, that might have been a lot more of the headache at that point in time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yes.
All right, note to self. I've
That's why we
actually
like
been
to
back
lean
to
off
just
of it.
one cup a day.
Yes, yeah, and
Yeah,
ideally before we do a detox, if the goal is to reduce caffeine or remove it completely, because a lot of people do like to do that during the detox and kind of use this as a time to
Yeah.
Reset that, then you want to wean off of it beforehand so you don't have the headache on top of the
Yeah.
day.
Note to self.
Yeah.
Note to self for sure. Um, so I'm curious for you, what does it mean for you these days to live in alignment with the flourish frequency? And how has the flourish frequency impacted you in your life?
Yeah, yeah. So for me, it's really about finding this kind of ease and flow when it comes to food and my relationship to food. Because I used to spend so much of this like wasted mental energy thinking
Mhm.
about like, is food good or bad, and what should I have on my plate? And then I was, having digestive issues. So then it got to a point where I didn't think I could be eating anything that wasn't
Yeah,
going to bother me. So there was so much of this like confusion around food, right?
yeah,
And so being able to get to a place where that's no longer the case, and I can actually look at food and kind of fall in love with food again and for what it can provide for me, and it's not the enemy, it's actually my friend and can help me. I think
yeah,
it's exactly, what you're talking about, of just finding that kind of ease with things, and not being it doesn't have to be hard, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you shift your entire relationship with it. And I
Mm.
think relationship is everything, right? It's
Yeah.
like no matter what it is that you're in a relationship with, if it's not a healthy relationship, it's going to have an impact that's not healthy.
Right.
So, do you think that there's a space for grace and forgiveness in this process too,
Mm.
when it
Yeah.
comes to working with people in their relationship with food and the impact that that has on the frequency?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is so important to kind of healing our relationship with food, because there's so much shame that we can bring ourselves around food, right? And if
Yeah,
we mess up, then we beat ourselves up, and that doesn't get us anywhere, right? We
yeah,
just stuck and we just keep kind of repeating the same pattern. So finding the that shift and giving yourself grace and forgiveness. And one way that I do that is shifting out of this mindset of judgment into curiosity, right?
yes.
Right? Right?
One of
So
my favorites.
yeah. Yeah.
Curiosity is like the answer to everything. And it's funny because as we've been talking today, I keep hearing myself say, I'm curious. And it's true. I am curious. And I think I like
Yeah.
just honestly, I've trained and habituated myself to be curious all the time now. But
Yeah.
I love that you brought that up in relationship to food too, and being curious, because it does. It shifts you, curiosity shifts you out of worry into wonder, and out of judgment into, I don't know, joy.
Yeah.
Or has the ability to help shift you. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. And then you realize that it's not willpower, or you didn't, it's
yeah,
not something that, oh, I'm not going to be able to, yeah, I'm not the person that's going to be able to accomplish this or do this or eat right. Because you think back and you get curious about why you made that decision. And then you really undercover what was going on. Like,
right.
oh, I was exhausted and I hadn't eaten lunch. And so that's why I made that choice, right? And
Exactly.
from a place of compassion then,
Yeah.
instead of judgment.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for saying that. Well, Lori, thank you so much for sharing your journey today, for sharing your wisdom and your heart with us. And for those of you listening, if this episode sparked something in you, trust that. You don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight. You just need to take one loving, aligned step towards the woman that you're becoming. And that could be drinking more water, it could be slowing down, it could be listening to your body. And maybe it's asking, what am I holding on to that's no longer aligned with who I want to be? Remember that food is energy, and your energy is everything. And when you start honoring that truth, your whole life really begins to shift. So if you love this conversation, just be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend who's ready to raise her frequency. And of course, you can learn more about Lori and her offerings. Lori, you want to share your website?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's wellnessbender.com.
Yep. And can you just quickly tell everybody a little bit about what maybe some of the different ways that you work with people?
Sure. Yeah. So I do have my seasonal detoxes that we talked about that I do multiple times a year. And that's where I bring a group together, and I do it, and everyone's doing it together, which is so nice, and to have that support. But if it doesn't fall within your schedule, I do lead people through a detox on their own or with a small group of people that can be organized as well. And then I have one-on-one offerings that you can see on my website. Everything we talked about today is more under the mind-body transformation
Yeah,
part of the program that I do. So that would be where you'd find out more information about that. But I do have a holistic wellness reset that's more about functional medicine, lab testing, and kind of getting deeper into what's really going on by doing some testing that would uncover that.
perfect.
Mhm.
Wonderful. Lori, thank you so much for joining me here today. And until next time, keep listening to your body, keep trusting your energy, and keep choosing to flourish. Thank you for tuning in to the Flourish Frequency Show with me, Beth Larsen. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and are leaving with a heart full of inspiration and a mind buzzing with the possibilities of more. Tune in every third Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio for more frequency boosting conversations. And if you want more help getting into your flourish flow and stepping into the possibilities of more, you can find me at BethLarsenCoaching.com. That's BethLarsenCoaching.com, Larsen with an E.